Hello, everybody, and welcome to DevSecOps Workshoppin with One Technology, featuring GitLab, Red Hat, OpenShift, and Red Hat Ansible. Today, we're going to do a workshop showing how Red Hat and GitLab can integrate together and giving you the tool set for your DevSecOps journey. So with that said, I'm going to hand this off to Joseph from GitLab. He's going to get us started. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Matt. So hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Valeriano with GitLab. I'm a solutions architect for our public sector team. And I'm going to kick us off with a few slides just to set the agenda of what you can expect for the rest of this workshop. Okay, so can everyone see a welcome screen?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome, thank you. So for today's workshop, what we're going to do is we're going to kick off with a little description about GitLab itself. I will provide some slides for those materials. And then David Marcus is going to present us with an overview of Red Hat and some of the values and benefits that that organization brings to the table. After that, we're going to break for a few minutes to give everyone a chance to answer emails, to be human, or do whatever else you need to do. And then the second part of the workshop is going to be really about setting up that Ansible Tower integration with GitLab. So everyone should have received a registration email yesterday or last night sometime with instructions on how to access your GitLab instance and also how to clone the template project. If you didn't get that email or if you missed it or whatever the case might be, it's okay. Well, during that first break time that you see from All Times Mountain here from 11:10 to 12 or 11:20, we will go through some of those steps kind of on the side to make sure everyone's ready to hit the ground running for the workshop part one. The instructions that you should have received will look something like this, maybe without the images there, but the redemption code is going to be key there. And if you haven't redeemed your GitLab instance yet, the keynote here is for step 3 down below. You want to save those credentials. They're randomized and they're not going to be very clear if you get into GitLab and you forget which user is you. So please save those off so that you can access those later. When you do access your GitLab environment, for those that haven't done so yet, you can see that after you've redeemed your invitation code, you're going to use that yellow button to access your GitLab instance. If you do have problems, feel free to chat us in the Q&A here in Zoom. There are going to be people monitoring that Q&A at all times to answer your questions. And if there's something that applies to the larger group, we could take a break and answer that as a group. So hopefully this is what you expected, something along the lines of the agenda that I just showed, and that you're here for the GitLab and Red Hat workshop. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing these slides and we're going to get into the introduction to GitLab portion of the workshop. Okay. So you should see my slides show up here shortly. I started from the end. Let me start from the beginning here. All right. So this is the introduction to GitLab portion of the workshop. So as I mentioned earlier, for those that are joining us a few minutes late, my name is Joseph Valeriano and I'm a solutions architect with GitLab. I'm based out of the Denver area, and I will be walking you through the GitLab workshop portion. So we're going to talk a little bit about source control, CI/CD pipelines, merge request approvals. So maybe some familiar concepts or maybe some that are new. But I think we're going to go through at a pretty good pace that allows everyone, regardless of comfort level, to get something out of this workshop. And just one little note too, these slides that we're presenting here today are also going to be packaged up in PDF form. So for attendees, we're going to give you the link to access these documents after the fact. so that if you need to reference them or you just really like them, you can go through and leverage those at your convenience. Another housekeeping note is that this demo environment that we're using today will go away either in the next day or two. So if there's anything that you want to download and save and upload into your own GitLab instance, by all means, please do that at the end of this workshop. So GitLab is the single application for the CI/CD process. And so when you see this diagram here, what this really is the software development lifecycle, or SDLC, laid out in a different format. So you might be used to the SDLC being laid out in a serial fashion, where really we put manage at the top because that's where kind of the business or the regulations are going to come from, some higher level purpose, something that guides the organization. The actual development and release of software is an iterative process, so hence the infinity side, right? We're doing this over and over and over again. And then finally, we also secure the applications and defend our environments from unwanted attack or unwanted access. And so when we go through the agenda today, we're going to talk about GitLab in this kind of context, but also we're going to specifically focus around GitOps and what that means, because that's really what our workshop's going to focus on today, is how can we and how can you as a member in your organization shift security left, but also shift the ability to modify or adapt to infrastructure needs on the fly. And we're going to specifically emphasize how GitLab and Red Hat together provide a critical solution that customers can start with immediately. So one of the keys here is predictability. So through this whole process, there's going to be nothing essentially customized. There's going to be nothing that requires all this extra overhead to configure. Because what happens when you do that is that it becomes very specialized and non-reproducible. So that if you want to expand this to other agencies or to other projects in your organization, it's very difficult. There's a lot of factors to be involved with that. But really, when we're going through GitLab today, we're going to be all about helping you be able to modify a problem on the fly and how to do that in a secure fashion. Because what we really want to do is be frequent and predictable in our ability to match needs. Another quote is about transparency. So everything that you see here is in a GitOps type fashion, or maybe some have heard of inner sourcing, right? It's going to give the whole entire organization visibility into the steps that we're taking. We're going to enforce quality so that nothing makes it out to non-production or production without an approval process. And your pipeline is going to be configured to do the same thing over and over and over, right? We're going to enforce that quality in a repeatable fashion. And so if you do that in a very siloed environment, or if you do that where the information is only visible to a very select few of individuals, it kind of becomes this black box where no one really knows what's going on. If we can open that up and allow people to see the quality that we're enforcing, it also allows for extra input and allows other people to use some of the best practices that we've implemented. And so what predictability means for us today, it's going to be a better allocation of resources, hence the Ansible playbooks that we're going to work with today. We're going to have less overspend, right? We're not recreating the wheel with each separate project. One of your steps today for the workshop was to clone one of our projects. If you need to clone an effort and down the road, you can use work that other people have done so that you're not connecting or rewriting files that maybe other people have written before. And in the spirit of transparency, this results in a deeper understanding for the teams. Empowering people at the team level is really huge for GitOps. It's about letting people have an understanding of the environments they're deploying to. It's about letting them know the steps that we're going to run through to make sure that we're deploying the right environment. It's allowing everyone to come up to the same level versus these kind of siloed approaches where the specific information lives with an individual or two. Now, a little story is back a few years ago, maybe more than a few years ago, I was a product owner in the defense industry. And so I'm sure we might even have a few people in a similar situation today attending this workshop. But what happened when I inherited these efforts were that I found that these software teams were developing very similar technologies, but they were doing everything in their own specific customized way. And what happened was that these teams had their own specialized tools, their own specialized infrastructure, their even own processes for how they accomplished work. And what made things more difficult is because these efforts were similar, they shared some of the same resources that they needed to work together on. But the problem is, if as a product owner, when I inherited the requirements, so to speak, I would look in one tool for one project and another tool for the other project, and they didn't speak the same language. They weren't planning on the same cadence, so that when team one was delivering a package and team two was dependent on that, they were just asynchronous. And so as a result, there was a lot of inefficiencies, frustration, and a lot of rework. And the environment that these teams were working on looked something like this picture that you see before you. You can call it a plate of spaghetti where everything's kind of going all over the place, or a spider web. But you see all these very specialized tools that do one thing or maybe a few things. They do them very well. But what they also give, and that's maybe not obvious to everybody, is separate procurement processes, separate update mechanisms. They could break dependencies within your organization. They require specialized skill sets. All things that as an organization, if we're going to bring transparency and understanding up, make that much more difficult. And so you get all these data models. How do you train people on these? If you lose a specialist who leaves the organization for some reason, and that's your specialist in one of these tools, all of a sudden you try to quote unquote get smart on some of these tools. And GitLab solves this problem by being that single application that does the same features that all those previous tools do. So it's giving you that single sheet of music. It's allowing you to train people in a singular tool where it's a lot more efficient and cheaper and easy to do so. We allow data to flow natively through all the different repos and projects within GitLab, which really results in the values of transparency, ituration, accountability. So all the good things, right, that we want in an organization and from the people contributing, GitLab's going to enable that in a much easier, user-friendly way. So with GitLab, and we talk about the repeatability and the speed of development within GitLab, a lot of that is based on this flow that we're going to work through today. So this is kind of what you're looking at. Oops, excuse me, let me go back. So this is the flow that we're going to start. We're going to create an issue based on some known vulnerability or known error within the template, the project template that you cloned earlier. And we're going to create a merge request that allows us to start working on that in a safe environment where we're not overwriting some master or some main baseline that needs to be protected. We're going to go through these changes. We're going to visualize them. We're going to see what the impact of those changes is in real time before we merge that into a destination. And where that's helpful is if you've ever had someone give you a requirement of some sort, and they say, hey, I want to develop XYZ, in their mind, they know what that means, excuse me. But if you're writing in text, it's a lot harder to understand because we're coming from different backgrounds, context, knowledge bases, and so forth. But if I can work on something and show you what that change looks like in real time before it gets into production, that's huge. Reducing the need for rework and unmet expectations. Please excuse me. So we're going to finalize with some peer reviews, merge request approvals to make sure that we're not deploying the wrong playbook or what have you. And it's going to end up with a finished product where you're going to spin up some environments in Ansible Tower and to visualize those changes and the success of those deployments through GitLab. Now there's an article here linked, and remember these PDFs will be available after the workshop, is that GitLab was mentioned in this article as the greatest DevOps tool of 2020. Now we tend to agree because we work for GitLab, but what's also really cool if you click on this article is OpenShift and Ansible are also listed in this greatest tools for 2020. So I invite you to review this. It's a pretty good read at your convenience. If you've been in the industry more than a couple of years, you know that the landscape of software is changing. And so if you're older like I am, then you remember some of the old waterfall days, right? These big, long monolith efforts where it just took forever to deliver, rarely on time, rarely on budget, and so forth. And so as a response to that, Agile became more prominent 10, 15 years ago in ways to help meet the evolving customer needs while still satisfying the intent of an effort. Well, that was good too, right? We became more iterative, we can make changes and pivot more quickly. But what we've realized too is with tooling and automation, DevOps, where we can start to truncate that software development lifecycle, like one of those first diagrams I showed. And so what we've done is we've taken a process that maybe in the waterfall days would have taken 6 months. We can replicate many of those same features or those steps in a much smaller fashion, like maybe even a couple hours or a couple days, depending on the level of effort. Well, the continuing evolution of that is becoming from more cloud native technologies, right? So we're able to deploy to any infrastructure at any time. We're able to leverage hosted or SaaS solutions so that you're not spending up these resources on your own, but they become more dynamic depending on the infrastructure that you use. And so that's where GitOps comes into play. So kind of the theme for this workshop. And so what we're going to really do is we're going to go through that software development lifecycle, and we're going to apply these to infrastructure automation. So this is going to be, I think you're going to enjoy this workshop. And again, feel free to leverage or download your projects after this fact and see if you can duplicate or maybe modify slightly the steps in here, and you can either teach this internally to your own organization, or if we have a follow-up one of these workshops, feel free to invite your coworkers to join us next time. And so what is GitOps? Well, loosely it's infrastructure as code plus a merge request, which we're going to go through here, like an approval gate with DevOps, or the continuous integration and continuous deployment. So it's that repeatable pipeline that allows you to perform certain quality checks or certain jobs based on definitions for the project. So that each time someone's checking in code or making a change to a file, you're going to run those tests every single time, because it's a lot easier to modify a playbook when you found out it failed within the commit and through the pipeline that results from that, versus having that crash something in production and try to reverse engineer or troubleshoot. So we've briefly mentioned the infrastructure as code, merge request, and CI/CD. So we're going to start with the infrastructure as code. So this is where the Ansible playbook comes into play. So we're going to go through these steps. We're going to modify a syntax error. I'm not going to spend as much detail on this portion because the Red Hat personnel are way more qualified than I am and can go into much more detail, but this is going to be our first component. The merge request, that's on a project by project basis here, is we're going to assign kind of quality assurance people or groups of people to say, hey, nothing makes it into some destination without these approvals or a number of approvals. And this can work in many different ways within GitLab. It can be by a person. So say Matthew Fernandez, nothing gets passed until Matthew's approved it. Or we can say if Matthew's a part of a group, maybe he's part of a chief engineer or some engineering leadership group. We can say one person from that leadership group has to approve this merge request, and maybe Matthew's a member of that, he can approve it. But what that benefits is if Matthew's on vacation or whatever the case may be, is that merge request is not held up until he returns. Someone else from that group can approve it. And we can have multiple groups. If there's multiple stage gates or phases that need to be approved, we can implement that as well. I think I'm going backwards. Here we go. And so the continuous integration and continuous delivery is going to be based on a CI YAML file. Now, the short of that within GitLab is that YAML file is going to be your definition of the jobs and the stages that are run. So we're going to set one of these up. I mean, you've already inherited one that's set up, but we're going to add some of the variables that CI YAML relies on as part of our workshop. So you're going to see that, hey, we can repeat some of the same steps, but I'm not using someone else's permissions. I'm using my own and adding those to my project. So how does GitOps work? Well, I showed you that flow earlier. So now you can see kind of in the context of the workshop that we have here is that we're going to commit our changes to the Ansible playbook, and we're going to run a lint job. That's kind of where our failure is going to start today. I don't mean to give the secret away, but we've made this simple, but also something emblematic of reality. So we're going to check that syntax, and we're going to make sure that you're not deploying something incorrectly. So that's how GitOps is going to work here within the GitLab and Ansible Tower flow. And so we're going to start here with the developer journey. So regardless of whether you're waterfall, agile, DevOps, cloud native, anywhere along that journey, GitLab allows you to, or meets you where you're at, but gives you room to grow without bolting on all these other tools. So most people within GitLab start at the source control aspect, right? The Git in GitLab, it's what we're famous for, or one of our original points of fame. But also within that, you bring your files into source control, and there you go. But also we make it easy to create a continuous integration and continuous deployment for your projects. So whether you're a novice and you need help creating your pipeline, we're going to give you an auto DevOps capability that will detect what kind of code you're developing and give you a pipeline based off of that. It's kind of like the easy button for continuous integration deployment. We meet you there. And then as you become more mature or experienced, you can customize that or extend it any way that you would like. For people that say, hey, I'm not a developer, I only do security or monitoring, or I'm a business analyst. Awesome. We have those features within the platform as well. We allow for requirements management, issue tracking, managing of epics and tying multiple issues, which we will get into during the workshop. But we're going to allow you to adopt GitLab and grow within an application versus training people in 15 different tools, procuring those different tools, upgrading and integrating those tools asynchronously. So what you get at the end is a single license, reduced maintenance, and a lot less headache. When starting GitLab, it's always huge to have metrics. It's hard to know where you're going unless you know where you've come from, right? So at the beginning, we allow you to measure lead time. We allow you to obtain burn down or burn up charts, right? So that you can measure progress within GitLab. You can see over time, are we getting better or worse at these particular metrics? That's an easy way to justify the investment or the time that you're using within GitLab. Oh, and by the way, not just for speed, but right, if we're delivering bad or vulnerable code fast, it's still not worth anything. So we provide metrics around security and compliance. We scan your code, we scan your containers, we provide dynamic testing, there's fuzz testing. There's all sorts of ways to find vulnerabilities within either packages you're using or the containers. If you can't measure that, how do you know what you're developing is secure? Until some security team or some audit throws it back at you later on and said, hey, this is all insecure. Hopefully everyone on the team is still there. Hopefully that context around the code is still fresh in your mind. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of effort and a lot of headache. So we're going to give you those metrics as well. So wherever you find value within your particular role, we're going to be able to provide metrics and kind of a user-friendly way to perform your job. So that's it for the GitLab portion of the slides. Please, I can't see the Q&A right now, but if there are questions, please feel free to post them in there, as there are people monitoring that Q&A at all times. But at this time, I'm going to hand the mic over to David Marcus from Red Hat.
All right, thanks, Joseph. Let me adjust my desk real quick, and I am ready to get started. All right, so who is Red Hat? Red Hat is the leader in open source movement. We productize open source projects that are basically can empower your organization to innovate at the same speed of the open source community. My background is I was a NASA contractor for 5 years, and then I was a defense contractor 5 years before that. So a lot of the topics and technologies that we use, I've actually used in the field, as well as been a customer to Red Hat and been actually had like a lot of long relationships there. So I'll try to interject some of my own experience, just like Joseph had, and try not to duplicate what he said, because he actually put some of these topics extremely well. So a lot of the projects you can see here are listed that come out of the community, what they result in upstream, and then the Red Hat product offering that we have today. We're just going to focus on 2 of them, specifically as it relates to GitOps. So it'll be Red Hat OpenShift and Ansible automation. Next slide. So what is GitOps? Joseph did a really good job of explaining this. I have just a slightly different take on it. And this was something that I used quite a bit, specifically for flight software development and integration, as well as ground software for vehicles. So how I understood GitOps, and it's exactly like Joseph said, it is, it's this desired state versus current state comparison. So GitOps will treat Git as a source of truth for your deployments, but where it gets interesting is where the divergence occurs. So this is a divergence between your Git repo and the state of your production environment. The really cool part is how that alignment gets converged, how that correction applies. And that's where your infrastructure, those endpoints, are actually adjusting themselves to get to the true sense. So GitOps from the CI/CD pipeline standpoint leans more towards the CD piece, and I can explain that as well if anybody has questions. The problem that we're really trying to solve is the repeatable way to handle resources, the repository of files that'll store our declared state, which is what we'll be using for GitLab. The automation framework that can scale out and make those changes, either apply or self-apply, and then a way to trigger those changes when something does happen. Go on to the next slide. So tools that can help you do this in your organization, from the prescriptive sense of GitOps. So GitOps is actually a coined term that does have a very specific meaning from Weaveworks, but it's also been a concept and a methodology that's really developed. I actually pulled out my Extreme Programming Applied book because I had to read that, and I've been trained with Agile and gone through quite a different set of practices, from waterfall to Wagile to what should be Agile, as well as doing GitOps in production. So it's been an interesting journey and application, but the way I do see it is that there's 2 different senses for this. There's the very prescriptive sense, where you would have an observed state, and you have an agent in that endpoint that self-observes and pulls those changes, which is what Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift would do. So again, it's reconciling its own differences against the source of truth. Kubernetes does have the ability to manage and compare the current state of your infrastructure against the source. It makes it really easy and automated to do testing and rollbacks, deployments, roll forwards, all with a complete audit trail. In the non-prescriptive sense, on the other side of the screen, this is more of like an agentless approach. And this basically pulls the desired state, but then sends it out to the endpoints. So it's doing a little bit of both. But in this sense, it does suffer from the sense that you kind of have this, like, what is true right now in production? Up until now, there haven't been a ton of means to do that effectively. But what you're seeing more recently is with Red Hat Ansible supporting things like diff alerts and webhooks, as well as scheduling. All of these capabilities that are now embedded into these tools allow that sense of what is really true right now be more accurate and effective. With that same approach, it can also auto apply when those changes are updated into GitLab or that divergence occurs. to reconcile and converge those differences between your desired state versus your current state. And really that's what you're trying to get to, is an automated way for those environments to keep themselves at your desired state. So we can go to the next slide. So what I'd like to do now is I'll just describe a little bit about OpenShift and Kubernetes, take a look at this tool, understand how it applies to GitOps, and then we'll do the same thing for Ansible as well. So OpenShift is Kubernetes for the enterprise. For those of you not familiar, it's the leading application container orchestration tool. It was open sourced by Google, but it provides mechanisms that have been kind of taken the industry by storm, from self-healing to auto discovery and orchestration. It supports the microservices architecture extremely well. So by itself, if you haven't done it, Kubernetes pretty much immediately starts asking you for add-ons, right? Because it was designed by Google to be lean and mean. It wasn't trying to be an enterprise platform, but it was designed to be like a builder platform. So things like storage class, registries, ingress routing, a dashboard, role-based access controls, these are all functionalities that don't come out of the box with Kubernetes. So Red Hat, we make significant contributions upstream. We provide those upstream inputs, everything from role-based access controls, custom resource definitions, network policies, all things that an enterprise would need to run a platform like that at scale, you know, depend on mission critical apps to be hosted on it and developed on it, as well as, you know, have this support model that, you know, if something does happen, it's already been tried, tested, and certified, and you have somewhere to go when problems do arise. OKD, which you see in the middle there, this is Red Hat OpenShift upstream. So we do package all the components needed to run Kubernetes. It's very similar as far as distributions go, in the sense that they're both open source projects. But the real difference happens in that next phase, where we start packaging in other projects like our Istio, our operators, and other various resources that we find at the industry level are really needed, and needed in a way that can be supported. I have done this where I've had to baseline both OKD and OpenShift in parallel in a production environment for 1 quarter. And the hardest part I had is we were unable to keep OKD up and patched with all of the specific versions that we depended on and relied on, because that community is pushing updates so quickly, and getting that support is so difficult that we found once we had to apply security patches, once we had to make sure that we were meeting with our compliance requirements, we were redeploying the system. We were just doing a full redeploy of the cluster just to get it good. Otherwise, you kind of become this organization that's now maintaining an OpenShift cluster and all of the projects that go into that. But Red Hat OpenShift does build on that. It does undergo extensive testing. It does validate all of the components and certifies them. And it obviously has a support model behind it with Red Hat. Next slide, please. So if you were to pop the hood of OpenShift and just kind of get a look at as far as like what's powering this thing to happen, you can see at the heart of OpenShift is Kubernetes. But again, in order to take that builder platform of Kubernetes and make it something that is more scalable, you have this Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or Red Hat Core OS, which is the operating system on the infrastructure. This actually allows Kubernetes to manage the infrastructure below it, as well as the services that run on top of it. So those cluster services are going to be things like a registry or KubeVirt that allows you to run VMs in concert with your containers, as well as monitoring for situational awareness. You have workload needs, application needs, and developer services that I won't dive into, but you also have this kind of single pane of glass, multi-cluster management capability that does allow you to manage multiple clusters through a single platform. And the thing that I like most about OpenShift is actually coming up in the next slides, and this is because this is where you're really putting it to work. Okay, thank you. So from the single platform, administrators, IT operations are going to work off of a view of OpenShift from the UI. They'll have basically full access across the entire cluster, everything from deploying and managing apps on demand, handling upgrades of the system, pushing services, simulating failures and recovering failures if manual intervention is needed. as well as just taking and restoring backups of different states. These are all things that you would usually have one tool suite that IT operations would work in, and then you'd have a completely different interface that you'd have to manage, or a different tool suite that developers would work in. It's very difficult to find a single platform that both communities can come and be effective on. I can go to the next slide, thanks. So like I said, developers have their own view. This was something that hit home for me the most because I spent a long time managing a front end that allowed self-service for developers to be effective in. Now, you also have a suite of other tools, whether it's the command line tools, both for administrators and developers, or whether it's the UI tools, like you see here, where you have this web front end. But developers have their own view, and this is abstracted away from a lot of the infrastructure stuff that they don't really need for their day jobs. The other piece that you're going to see here is that developers will get access to validated images and solutions from partners that are out there, security, scanning, and signing throughout the entire delivery process that they're going to depend on in order to make sure what they're scaling and pushing at this Kubernetes level and scale is operational and safe. Because it's open source, it does open the door for a lot of languages and frameworks and tooling that these developers need. A lot of them do come with initial installation, but it does, again, open up the door. I have been locked into a lot of the proprietary tools that make it just very difficult and rigid to build processes around, and just end up locking you in, and it's hard for innovation. Next slide. So this is real meat and potatoes. This is Red Hat, OpenShift, and GitOps. So in my opinion, I think OpenShift and GitOps is really like the true sense, because what it's doing is taking that source of truth, GitLab, down below, and it's applying it, whether it's your infrastructure or your applications, and allowing Kubernetes to manage all of that stack automatically. So what I have on the left-hand side of the screen is actually the principles of GitOps. This is that coin term that you have from Weaveworks, in the sense of, like, if you were to do GitOps, what would you do here? So you can see pretty much all four of those principles align. Because it's Kubernetes based, it is able to observe its own state. It's able to compare against a declared state, and it's able to reconcile automatically. Yep, I'm going to go to the next slide. That's perfect. The next topic and tool suite, this is what we're going to be working in today. This is kind of like that next iteration, that agentless approach to GitOps. But this is Ansible Automation Platform. So if you haven't heard of Ansible, or haven't heard of Ansible Automation Platform, which is the Red Hat offering, best to think of it in 4 layers. You have an open source community, and this is something that we contribute to upstream, just like you saw with the OpenShift process. We harden those solutions, and then we productize them at the enterprise level. Ansible Engine is what powers the automation and runs all of the automation that you'd be developing. You'll be running that today in the GitOps lab. We won't be developing playbooks, won't be running ad hoc commands, but you will be fixing an error in one. So you'll get some exposure to that. Ansible Tower is where we're going to spend most of our time today. And this is where Tower is what really enables Ansible to scale and be shared and reused and be effective. I've done open source Ansible as well, at least a North American level, across data centers. And what you do find is, if you were to go kind of like I guess I would say an open source approach and use the upstream, you do end up having a siloed automation structure that's very fractured. It makes it difficult to share playbooks and reuse playbooks. It makes it difficult to allow other teams to, really collaborate in the sense and be effective. So what you start to see is that journey is, a lot of folks will start with automation using Ansible. And as they start to see the need to scale it, reuse it, have a web front end to allow for role-based access controls, allow other teams in, that you need. Something like Tower is extremely effective and provides capabilities that enterprises depend on. The top level is the engage level. This is where Red Hat provides everything from automation, analytics, and calculations to playbooks that you could actually remediate against any registered RHEL systems that you have. So next slide. I won't do a deep dive here, but I do want you to be familiar with some terms if you haven't heard them. So this is kind of a look at that Ansible engine if you were to blow out the diagram. It's made up of playbooks. Again, you'll be editing one today called an Apache YAML playbook. It'll be doing some things that will be explained in the lab. You won't be writing it, you'll be fixing it. But in that playbook, it does use things like modules, which allow automation to kind of happen, I would say. You have plugins that just further extend how Ansible can be executed and tailored to your environment. And it's going to run across an inventory. And that inventory is something that you're also going to have. You'll have 3 nodes you'll be managing between a prod and non-prod. Again, that'll be explained fully. And you won't be doing anything out of the CLI. You'll actually be working out of the tower instance. So this is, if you were to go to the next slide, this will be the interface that you'll be seeing most of today when it comes to Ansible. So from tower, just so you have a sense for it, on the left-hand side of the screen is like this gray menu. It's kind of broken up into 4 categories. A lot of the time will be spent under number 2, under resources, where you can do things like create credentials that you'll be doing, create projects and connecting those projects to a live GitLab repo that you'll also be doing, creating templates, which are a way of parameterizing existing playbooks to run for your needs. So when we say you can reuse playbooks and share them, templates are the way that you do that. Templates are the way you allow other teams to use, various playbooks from across your organization and tune them to run for what they need, as opposed to going through and recreating or copying and editing the entire playbook. This is that view into that 4th top layer as far as what we provide at cloud.redhat.com. This is your automation hub, as well as your automation analytics. So if you have any existing, RHEL licenses today, you likely have something in here that you could benefit from just with the existing subscriptions you have. And then you do get quite a bit here as like push button deploy remediation with playbooks, pretty much straight out of these URLs. So probably the last one is, this is probably the more important one. How do Red Hat, Ansible, and GitOps apply? So I scratched out that line number 4. And the reason why I did that is because this is more of an agentless approach like we talked about earlier. So because of the way Ansible does allow for diff alerts to be supported, webhooks to be supported, job schedules to be enabled, Ansible is able to make that sense of what's the declared versus what's the running state. It does some other cool things that you'll get into as far as like item potency, only making changes where changes are needed. It can be run recurringly. This is something that I used to do quite a bit, is we would run Ansible jobs just on a schedule, just to make sure that we knew that that known state was being adhered to. But I think enough of me talking. It's probably time to turn it over to the lab. So I will go ahead and close out my presentation. Thank you.
So thank you, David. So we are at the end of the introduction portion of the workshop. What we're going to do next is take a break. So we have about 10 minutes until we actually start off or kick off the GitLab portion of some configurations. For those that didn't get the chance to set up their GitLab user account and or clone a template project, this will be your chance right now to do that. And then the next portion is we'll be adding some Ansible tower variables, try to say that fast, into your GitLab CI/CD project, but only after we've created your account and cloned your project. So right now, the time that I have is 10:47 Mountain. So that would be 12:47 Eastern. So we'll kick off the next portion of the workshop at the top of the hour. So 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern. Everyone else that needs to set up their environment or clone their project, go ahead and do so now. And if you run into problems or have questions, please use the Q&A function. Thank you. Well, hi everyone, welcome back. It is top of the hour now, and we are going to get into the initial portion of setting up your GitLab project before we get into the Ansible Tower steps. So hopefully everyone had a chance to take a break, answer emails, or what have you. As we go through these steps, I'm going to post something here in the Zoom chat. So this should be available to everyone. So we are going to go through workshop steps, and these have been posted in a GitLab repo so that you can follow along, hopefully, as we go through these steps. But if life happens, you need to step away for a second, you can reference the link that I gave you, and it's going to walk you through how to do exactly what we're doing in the workshop. There's a little tip: if you want to follow along with us or are able to, open up those steps in another browser tab so you can kind of go back and forth, or whatever works for you for convenience. But we are going to start in the portion called 0-GitLab setup. So let me go ahead and share my screen here momentarily. Okay. Okay, so you should see my desktop here. All right, so the link that I sent you was to this repo for GitLab Ansible Workshop steps. So as I mentioned, we are starting here in the GitLab setup portion, okay? So the README for each of these sections where the steps are located is David and Matthew did an amazing job of setting up these documents to help not just walk you through textually, but with GIFs that will illustrate exactly what we're doing. So very cool, and kudos to them. So the first part of our workshop steps is to download your credentials, which hopefully most of you have already done. So we're going to go ahead and skip that part. I mentioned it, and this is not a prerequisite by any stretch, is to change the subgroup name. And the only reason being is that your GitLab demo credentials are very confusing, right? IU, blah, blah, blah. If you help relabel the group and you need to walk away, you can find it much more easily if it has, like, say mine does, JV for my initials. It's a lot easier than finding user IE, blah, blah, blah. So that's the part of that, but again, not a requirement, just a preference for ease of use. So as you can see here in this GIF, that we have the GitLab structure, where you have the Red Hat workshop and all those subgroups. That's where you're going to find your group located, again, with something either relabeled or with your credentials. So for those of you that, I saw there was a question earlier about where do we find this template project? Maybe it wasn't obvious because it was hyperlinked, but if you copy that hyperlink, or if you go to this particular repo, this is the template project that you are cloning into your own subgroup. Okay, so we're not going to walk through all of these steps, but the one key portion, if you notice that your cloned project is taking forever, it's just not importing that project, perhaps look at maybe including your demo username and password into that import process. So at the same place where you can see here, where there is the Git URL for repo, to clone that, you have to put your credentials in there. Otherwise, it's just to go on and on. So if you're seeing that, go ahead and try those steps first. And if you're still having problems, reach out to the Q&A where people can answer your questions during the session. Okay, so the next portion is after you have your GitLab project, right? So that's what I've done here. I've cloned that project. I have the workshop steps here. And if I also go through my workshop project, this is where we're actually going to, when I walk you through the GitLab portion, I'm going to use my GitLab project to show this in real time. So I haven't configured it anything other than importing or cloning this project. So I think the next portion is to go into the, where did my steps go? Here we go, is to go into your Ansible Tower environment or workshop bench. So Matthew Fernandez, I'm going to hand this off to you real quick, just to if there's any questions so people can access this to know how to get into their environment before we go back into adding some of these variables into GitLab CI. If you need me to stop sharing, just let me know.
Thank you so much, Joseph. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay with you. Cool. And I'll just work through the first little bit of the workshop steps. And I think I'm going to work from the slides, if that's okay with everybody. So yeah, I'm Matthew Fernandez. I'm a Ansible specialist at Red Hat and worked with Joseph and David to build out this workshop for you guys. This is actually the first time that we're putting this on, so hopefully it doesn't break too much and you guys enjoy it. So, like Joseph said, there are two versions of the instructions. We have some slides for you, which were posted, I think, in an email, and we also have the markdown version in GitLab. So I'm going to go through the slide versions and work through some of these things with you. Again, all of this is kind of in the GitOps methodology and trying to build out something that's automated but reproducible, like David and Joseph said earlier. So I'm on slide 4. These are the steps. I'm going to copy this template URL because I haven't done this yet. If you guys are having issues with this, please reach out in the question and answer. So copy this link, and I'm going to select import project. I'm going to import it from repo by URL. Going to enter the URL here, and I'm going to grab my Git credentials 3 because I've done this a couple of times already. Paste in my username, paste in my password. I'm going to call it Matt's Awesome Project 3. Cool. So hopefully you guys have already done this. You should see this import in progress. Huzzah! Okay, so everyone should be roughly at least at this step. Before we move on, I'm going to check the chat just real quick to see. Looks like we seem to be doing okay. All right, so moving on to, I'm on slide. Let's see, I did this. I'm now going to use our demo system to assign myself a workshop. And it looks like the URL is not in the slides. So I'm going to grab it from the markdown. Let's see, where are they? This one. Great, we did all of this already. Okay, so this is the correct URL, CE2A. My name is Matthew. I'll just do one word. Click on submit. And I have been given student 4's workbench. Fantastic. Okay, back to the slides. So I would recommend keeping this open, by the way, because you're going to reference some of these credentials and the information I'm presented on this page later in the lab. This is specific to each of you, so you all have your own workbench.
Hey Matt, can we just
All right.
pause right at the workbench and let's just see if anybody has any issues accessing that workbench for a minute?
Absolutely. Okay, now I can see the chat.
Is anybody having an issue getting their workbench? If you are, can you post something in either the Q&A? Or, yeah, probably in the Q&A, and we can work with you.
Alternatively, if you already have your workbench, maybe you could say thumbs up to make sure.
We only care about problems.
I just want to see successes.
Exactly.
I'm success driven as an automation engineer.
There you go. Well put.
Thank you. I'm not seeing a ton of chat. We do have people, right?
Matthew, there is a comment in the chat from Matthew Woodward saying his UI link isn't resolving.
Okay. That would be a problem. These workshops are built out in AWS, and their name service has given us issues in the past. Okay.
That looks like it's an issue just with student one. Testing some of the other ones seems to be okay.
If you are not able to resolve, then you can use its IP address. I can post that in the chat. How do I get to the chat? There we go.
Okay, that one does resolve with just the IP address. HTTPS
Okay.
:/IP.
Yeah. So just remember that if you do use the IP address, none of the X509 certificates are going to work for you. So you need to select or opt into insecure browsing. Just remember that for if you don't use DNS. And I apologize. I want to blame AWS, but it might be our deployment code.
So unless anybody has any other questions about accessing your workbench to mainly get to your tower user interface, let us know. If not, Matt, you can go ahead and continue.
Oh, I just noticed it's not encrypted. That's bizarre. Maybe try doing http://ce2a.open.redhat.com. I noticed it before. Okay, but yes, we can move on. Hopefully, so if you don't have this yet, make sure you post it in the question answer. But yes, we can move on. Okay. So now going to slide 7 in the instructions. Still on 0-GitLab setup, I believe. So we're going to go into GitLab. I'm going to open up 2 side-by-side windows. All right, so this on my right is my cloned project. I called it Matt's Awesome Project -3. And the instructions say, oops, to go to settings. So settings menu is down here, the little gear. And I need to find CI/CD, which is near the end. I'm going to click on it, and that's going to bring me to the advanced settings for CI/CD. By variables, I'm going to click expand. We're going to go ahead and add 2 variables. I believe these are called project variables in GitLab. So these are going to be specific to our project, and they're going to basically configure the CI/CD that's already within the project. So the first one is going to be called tower login, all caps, tower_login. The value is going to be, actually, it's going to be admin : So we're using this Ansible tower access at the very bottom of our workbench information. So the username is admin, and our password is displayed here. And it needs to be, per the instructions, admin : your tower password. So everybody should have something like this. Make sure you spell it correctly. I'm going to mask this variable so it's not displayed whenever our CI/CD runs. GitLab's pretty smart. It knows that sometimes we can keep secrets in here. And I'm going to click add variable. So you should see it saved in this area. The other variable we need to create is called tower_URL. So I'm going to click add variable again. Tower, all caps, _URL. The key for this one is going to be this, this UI link here. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to ensure that it's formatted correctly. So it should be the entire URL with no slash at the end. It's very important. I'm not going to mask this variable. I'm not going to protect it. This is just our tower URL. It doesn't need protection. I'm going to go ahead and add it. Okay, so everyone hopefully has gotten here where we have our tower login, our tower URL. These are going to come up later. Now we're going to move into Ansible Tower. So I already have this copied in my clipboard. So if you don't, again, it's in the workbench information. I'm going to have to log into it. So I'm going to use this admin and my password to sign in. And everyone should see Ansible Tower UI just like this, with a display of the past run jobs. So these actually run as part of the provisioning process. So everyone should have this. What we're going to do in here is create what's called a credential. So after logging in, we go to credentials on the left menu here. Logo's a little key. You can store any number of credentials in here. It supports many different kinds. We're going to create what's called an SCM credential. So some type of source control management. In this case, it's going to be Git. We're going to name it GitLab credential. Description is optional, but we're going to call it SCM credential or playbook. sync. The organization can be left blank. Credential type needs to be Git. Sorry, source control. So you can search and select source control. Great. Then we're going to grab the credentials that we used earlier to log into GitLab that we had to download as the username and the password. So this is basically going to give Ansible Tower the exact same access that us, the user, has to GitLab. And click save. Yeah.
So Matthew, I'm just checking in. For all the attendees, are you at this point now, or if you need us to slow down, please let us know. We'll let everyone catch up.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for stopping me, Joseph. I do tend to go a little bit quick. Just going to leave that off. All right. Hopefully everybody is keeping up. I'm going to continue. Okay, so we have this credential now within Ansible Tower. Next, we're going to use it to copy over the project from within GitLab into Ansible Tower. So in order to do that, we go to Projects. And we need to go back to GitLab. We need to go to the project that we created. On the repository page, there's this big blue button. We're going to copy the URL from the HTTPS section of that. Return back to Tower. And we're going to create a new project using this green square. You click it, and we get the options for our new project. We're going to call this Ansible Workshop Project with the description Workshop Playbooks. Here we're going to select the SCM type of Git. We're going to paste in the URL that we copied. Remember, it needs to be the HTTPS, not the SSH version. We're going to leave SCM branch commit blank. We're going to leave the SCM refspec blank. We need to select the SCM credential that we created just a second ago called GitLab credential. Going to select that. It's important to check this allow branch override because the CI that we created is going to use that feature later. We're also going to select update revision on launch. That way, every single time we launch a new job, Ansible Tower will pull the latest version of that. So hopefully everybody has their new project form filled out like this. And I'm going to click Save. Okay. How do you think everybody's doing on time? Joseph?
I'm not seeing any problems in the Q&A, but if you are having problems, please raise your hand, of course, virtually, and let us know. If you need, you could take a screenshot of the tower configuration so you can see which checkboxes do need to be toggled. And these steps are also in that link that I provided above to the repo with the workshop steps.
Great. Well, let's continue then. The next step is also in Ansible Tower. We are going to modify our inventories, or I guess in this case, inventory. So from the menu over here, we're going to go to inventories. The first step is edit the workshop inventory. So I'm going to go to this little pencil icon over here next to workshop inventory. It's going to give me the details as soon as I click that. We're going to go to groups up here in the selector boxes. We're going to add some new groups. So we do that by going to this green plus sign again to create a new group. The name of our first group is going to be non-production. You can give it a description, but we don't need to. I think it's self-explanatory because it's going to be the non-production inventory group. And click the save. You should see it pop up down here in our groups section. We're going to add another group called production. So make sure not to go to groups within here again. We need to go to this green plus down in workshop inventory. Production. Again, I think it's self-explanatory. And click save. Okay, so now we should have 4 groups down here. We're only going to use the production and non-production ones today. So going to slide 11 now. We're going to select the non-production group. We're going to go to these selector boxes and click hosts. And with the green plus, we're going to add an existing host. So we're going to add nodes 2 and 3 to the non-production group. So just, they have little select boxes. Check the boxes next to them and click save. Great, so now you should see these hosts pop up in our non-production group. Similarly, we're going to go to production. Click on it from down here. Go to the selector box for hosts. Click on the green plus again. Go to existing host and add node 1. And click save. Okay. Go back to inventories. Or click on the all groups. Oh, I guess my resolution is too small. Well, I was hoping it would show all of the different groups. If your resolution is high enough, you will be able to see a breakdown of all of your hosts. And you should have node 1 with web in production. We're not going to use web. And node 2 and node 3 as non-production. So hopefully everyone has gotten here by this point.
Again, if you're having problems and you're not seeing your nodes or the groups with web and non-production, please let us know and we'll walk you through on the side.
Looks like problems are being solved. Awesome. Okay. Now we're going to create a job template. So when we launch jobs in Tower, they're built off of job templates. So select templates from the menu on the left. We're going to use the green plus to create a job template. This is a slightly more involved form. Don't worry. Just follow the instructions exactly. The name does need to be capital. It needs to be capitalized in the same exact way as it is in the instructions. This is because, again, the CI is going to trigger this. So it's a computer. It has no room for play. So we're going to be calling the non-prod job template, all caps non-prod, deploy web servers. And deploy has to be capitalized, and the W in web servers also has to be capitalized. The description, you don't have to be as exact. But it's good to describe things. So we're going to select the job type of run. We're going to use the magnifying glass to select our workshop inventory. So you won't see the groups in here, but it's the same inventory that we just edited. We're going to select the project Ansible workshop project, not the other two. For SCM branch, make sure you select prompt on launch and leave the field blank. That's going to allow our GitLab CI to trigger Ansible jobs and also tell Ansible which branch to choose. For playbook, we're going to choose the only playbook that's in there, the apache.yaml. For credentials, for it. For limit, we're going to select, or rather, we're going to type, I believe it's non-prod. Yes. So this is on the next slide. Non-production. So this is selecting the group that we just built out within our inventory. It's going to tell it to run only on non-production nodes. So node 2 and node 3. The verbosity we can leave at 0. Job tags, leave blank. Everything else, leave blank. What we are going to do is select enable fact cache. This is just a performance thing. It's a little bit faster for jobs to run. And we're going to click save. So I'll leave this up just a little bit. I know there's a lot of information that we just configured in here. So it should match the little GIF that we have in the instructions also, if you want to watch that. The thing that really matters, well, yeah, go ahead, David.
Hey, I just forgot to jump in while we're taking a little bit of a breath and just kind of recap at least the different sections of Tower that were touched
Yes.
on, and kind of how they relate, really in operation and production. So the piece that you went through, like pretty much anytime you're integrating Tower with anything, and Tower is designed to be integrated with the tools and platforms that you have today. Usually those tools and platforms require some kind of credentialer authentication. And so that's pretty much always the first step that we find with Tower. From there, what you had done is you created this project. That project is what is really connecting these two endpoints together. You're connecting your GitLab repository, and then you're connecting Ansible Tower, which is going to serve as your GitOps mechanism that's going to update the target servers when the change is made in GitOps. So it's going to update what's running in production versus, what is the declared state. When you make that change later on in this lab, there will be that divergence, and that update will be applied through here. But that connection really happens at that project level that you tackled. When you get into templates, you had selected the Apache. So you basically selected the workshop inventory that Ansible Tower has the ability to manage. This could be a static inventory, dynamic inventory, many different inventories. There's a lot of different ways to do this. We don't usually see just one way. And we usually don't just see one inventory, although that also happens. So you're really specifying now at this template level. And that project, I think like Matt said, is this collection of templates, this collection of jobs or playbooks, if you're familiar with Ansible, and how you can leverage them. So how we used to do it is when I started with Ansible, we'd always write playbooks, and we'd have other teams out, like a network team that would want us to, do something with an F5 load balancer. Matt Brown, who's on the call, actually can attest to this one because he was in the room with me while we were doing this. And they would come to us, and we would go and write that playbook, even though we had something similar. So instead of just kind of replicating, recoding, and now having another iteration of a playbook, you can write them in a way and have Ansible Tower use them in a way that's more parameterized, something that is a little bit easier to leverage across a production or a non-production server, for example. Maybe you have different applications for that, or maybe they're in different subnets used by different groups. So each of the fields in here are really how you're tuning an existing playbook to be used by whatever team you're on or whatever function you have in your organization. There's a lot more in here. There's a ton of fields, so you can kind of get the sense of whether you're limiting it to a certain type of system, if you're forking it so you want to have better performance as far as what you're seeing, how things are getting executed, verbosity for debugging. There's really a lot of capability here, as well as the extra bars down at the bottom that we don't touch on. But you can really adapt in this tool to your environment pretty well, in the sense that it's also fully backed by APIs. A lot of the specific things that Matt was having you type in is because it's doing API calls in the back end. And so because those are set in such a way, the syntax for those makes sense, right? And I think we all probably have a very similar confirmation that we have to make for our tools to work, right? I always hated when we pulled tools in and they just overcomplicated the environment, as opposed to being able to kind of fit right in, right? And just get those gears and cogs to line up. So, but yeah, with that, I just wanted to at least give a little bit of background. Those resources are really how you get Tower to tie in, as opposed to like being another thing that you have to go and set up. And while it feels like a lot of configuration, hopefully it's going somewhat smoothly. And if you have any questions, let us know.
That's exactly right. Thanks, David. We are kind of connecting these two separate, very powerful tools, but all of this work will pay off in the end, you'll see. So I'm going to click save here. At the bottom, we should see our new non-prod deploy web servers job template show up. We're going to create a production template in pretty much the exact same way. Thankfully, once we have all of this filled out, Tower has this copy job template button. We're just going to copy this. And it creates one with the time you created it appended at the end. I just thought that was kind of cute. We're going to call this prod deploy web servers. And don't forget to change the limit to production. So this is going to work on our production nodes. There's only one of them in our case, but there could be arbitrary numbers of them. And don't change anything else.
Hey, Matt. Well, we did have the description to change for prod. Do they have to be as specific? Do they have to be as specific with the naming convention on this one? As far
the
as
description does not matter, but let's do it correctly.
and then what about the name for the non-prod? We had to be pretty specific with the name. For the prod, do we have to be as specific?
Yes. Well, actually, don't worry too much about it. Just do everything like the instructions say, David.
All right, if you say so. Just trying to have fun over here and break things.
Yeah. Suffice to say that a sage old neckbeard wrote the CI/CD, and he's very particular about how you name things. Also, don't worry about. You can go back and rename these things. Is very easy to do. So if you hit save and web servers was lowercase, just click on it and then edit it and then save it, and you'll be good. Okay, so now we should have two job templates. One of them is called non-prod in all caps, deploy web servers. The other one is called prod in all caps, deploy web servers. So the next step is we're going to launch the non-prod deploy web servers template. You can do that by going to it or by clicking this little rocket ship. Start a job using this. I'm just going to click it. It's going to ask you for the SCM branch. I'm going to type in master. It gives you a little overview of all of the settings that are currently configured for it. It's going to use the non-production limit, which is node 2 and 3 in our case, and the master branch. And I'm just going to click launch. The first time is probably going to take the longest. It's not going to take very long, probably, hopefully. But it is going to fail. And it's going to fail on purpose because we put a bug in your code. Joseph's going to walk you through how to fix that. But for now, we need to finish all of our configuration. There's one last thing to create within Ansible Tower, and that is to create a workflow. So I don't want you guys to get confused. A workflow is essentially a collection of job templates. And it's called a workflow because you connect them together in a workflow. So again, the name of the workflow is very important. It needs to be called promote to prod. Prod is all caps. The description, promo workflow, okay. I think we might have a typo in here. But the description doesn't matter as much. The inventory, I guess I'm just realizing in here, we don't need to configure that. It is important, you need to select prompt on launch for the SCM branch, just like we did for the job templates. I'm going to hold it here just for a second to make sure everybody catches up. And I also want to double check that in the markdown, this is correct. Okay. So clicking save here, it is going to open up the workflow visualizer, which is how you build out workflows. So when you click this little start button, it's going to create a node to the right. It already has in there selected a template. So we're going to add a job template as our first node in the workflow. The first one is going to be non-prod deploy web servers. So you have to go to these little selector radio buttons, click it, and then this little select will turn green, and you click select, and that adds it to the workflow. So we have our first node in the workflow. What this is normally used to do is sort of ladder logic. So on failure, we could add a node to go remediate something. We're using it just to string together essentially two job templates. So next to the non-prod, once the non-production environment has succeeded, we'll go ahead and deploy prod. So same thing, template, prod deploy web servers, and click select. There's also some other cool things in here. You can add approval nodes. So if manual intervention is needed within Tower, you can do that. We chose not to do that within the workshop because we're using GitLab for that. So your workflow should just have start. Next to that, you should have non-prod deploy web servers. And on success, we go to prod deploy web servers. Go ahead and click save when you have that. And then we're going to run, just for fun, we're going to run the workflow template. So after configuring things, you have all of your templates listed at the bottom here. Go ahead and click the promote to prod or the rocket ship. It's going to ask you for an SCM branch. I'm going to give it master again. And click next and launch. Surprise, surprise. The first thing it's going to do is try to run non-prod deploy web servers. From past experience, that has failed. And it failed here too, so it's not going to deploy production yet. This is an important piece, I think, of GitOps and DevOps. You need to fail in good ways. So this is a good failure. We tried to deploy a non-prod, and because we failed to deploy non-prod, we did not deploy prod. It's very important, I think. So we can go to the details here, and sure enough, it's a very similar error to what we had before. Something's wrong on line 7 of Apache YAML. So Joseph's going to show you how to fix that, I think, in the next step. I think in the agenda we had a break in between our two sections of this workshop. So I think, how does resuming at noon sound, Joseph?
That sounds great. And thank you, Matthew. And same with last time. If you have problems or need to catch up, you can use this time, reach out to us, and someone will be monitoring the Q&A to assist. But yeah, thank you, Matthew. And we will see everyone at the top of the hour for the next section.
Sounds good.
Hey, Joseph, we have a question in the chat regarding the lifetime of the lab. Can you talk to the GitLab lifetime, and then I can talk to the Ansible Tower one?
Will do.
Hey, David.
Yep.
Speaking of lifetimes, I noticed that the workshop that we stood up, I don't know if this is a new thing, but they let you extend it 3 times now.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so we can, I believe you pronounce it Ani. We can extend the tower life cycle. And Matt, if you want to go ahead and do that now while we're on break, then we can give you at least the extension of it. As far as like when that deadline would be, it does give us a couple extra days. Usually I think it goes in like iterations of 2 or 3 days when we provision them. It would be that part of the lab only. I think the GitLab one has a different deadline that I know Joseph will answer.
Yeah, so for the GitLab environment, for anyone who's concerned, it will expire around midnight tonight. So you have until then to use the GitLab environment. And if you want to retain this and upload into your own instance or to a free version of GitLab, just there next to the clone button that you've seen, there's a download option. So download that and you can re-upload it later.
And then always reach out if you have any questions. We can get you set up.
Okay, hi everyone. This is Joseph, and welcome back. It is the top of the hour. We are going to continue into the GitLab portion of the workshop. If you haven't had a chance to catch up, I will give everyone a minute or so as you get settled back into your desk, and then we will kick it off. All right, so that should have given everyone a chance to catch up. I'm going to paste the section in the workshop of where we are right now so everyone can follow along. So this is under the section titled 4-GitLab Workshop Steps. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so can everyone see a split desktop?
Yes.
Awesome,
Yep,
thank you.
looks good,
Greg.
Joseph.
Thank you. So on the right-hand side, you can see the steps that we're going to follow, and on the left is my cloned project. Okay, so what we've done before already is we've connected or integrated the tower environment with our GitLab project. In order for this to succeed, if I go to settings here on the bottom, you'll see CI/CD. I'm going to expand the variable section, and you will see that I have a tower login and a tower URL. So we've already walked through those, but if you don't have these, the integration's not going to work. Okay, so if you haven't had a chance to put those in, and on the same for the tower side for your credentials and tying this to your project, that's what Matthew did before our break. So I can return to my project itself by, in my instance, my J or the home here. And we're going to create with an issue. Okay, now as Matthew mentioned, we've already introduced a syntax error, but how do you know that? Well, we're going to check that and go to your pipeline that has already been defined. Now in GitLab, the pipelines are defined in what we call our GitLab-ci.yaml file. And so I'm going to click here and just introduce this before we actually run the pipeline. So within GitLab, as we talked earlier in the first part of our workshop where I had some slides to show you about bringing CI/CD to the developer, enabling or empowering users to perform predictable, repeatable processes. And that is really accomplished through this ci.yaml file. So through the clone project, you should have inherited this. And so the way this is defined is through stages and jobs that you can define, or we can provide you our auto DevOps capability, which will do this for you. But what Matthew has done is he's defined a lint, a test, and a deploy stage. So this is the order that the pipeline will run. Below, you can see the actual definition for that lint. So we use a Docker image and we run the Apache YAML that is also included or that you inherited in your clone project. We will make sure that the syntax is correct there. Once that is passed, so you can see the job below, once that is passed, we get into the test stage. So, okay, we will only get into the test stage under most circumstances once the previous stage is passed. So that's passed. Now we deploy our playbook into the non-production deployment that you saw before. So if I go back here to my templates, right? You remember that non-prod web server? That's exactly what we're tying into for this test stage. So you can see the job that's run, but you can also see the condition that this is only run on branches. So if we're only deploying for master or the main, that's going to go to production. The test before that to make sure this works so we're not messing up production is to test this for that non-production environment. Okay, so you see that below. Okay, once this is passed and this is only run versus on branches, then the deploy stage will be run against the master or mainline. So this is where everything is passed, it's been approved, and we're going to walk through this through the merge request. Then that's how a change is made to production. Okay, so it's that quality assurance. We're going to run this every time we do a commit to make sure we're not messing anything up before it gets to the main show. If I go back by clicking this house here, so this is my return to home, you can see some of the areas that we've already touched in the project where we cloned. If you are working from a local terminal, you can also clone to your local machine through SSH. And as I mentioned, also because this environment is ephemeral, it's not going to last, this demo environment's not going to last beyond the next day or so. If you want to upload these into your free GitLab instance, or if you're paid GitLab instance, you can simply download these as a tar.gz. And then the same way that you imported this project, where we did by URL, I'm going to just show you real quick before I continue. I click new project. Instead of, I click import, instead of repo by URL, which you did for cloning, it would just be a GitLab export. And then I would upload that file that I just downloaded. Make sense? So that's, there's also instructions online. GitLab is a very extensive documentation through docs.gitlab.com. It can walk you through some of those steps as well. All right, so let's go back into the finished project, so to speak. So we've added our CI/CD variables for the Ansible tower. You can see the GitLab-ci.yaml files in there already. This is our Apache playbook here that is going to, for most of you, actually, mine's fixed already. I need to revert it. Yours should say on line 7 here instead of name. Okay, so I'm going to make mine go back. I apologize. So once this is, I'm going to merge this once it's succeeded. So you should go into your Apache YAML. And if yours does not say here on line 7, please let us know. So I'm going to wait a second so people can check that, and then we will continue. And that also gives me a chance to revert mine to where the error should be. And I do not ever recommend merging a failed pipeline. Okay, let me check my Q&A here. Okay, doesn't look like there's any new questions. All right. So let me check. Looks like my Apache YAML is now broken. Okay, so for everyone who's in the same place I am, let's go to our pipeline here, the one that's based off the GitLab-ci.yaml. So if you click this rocket ship on the left-hand side, it'll say CI/CD. Go ahead and click on pipelines. I'll give you a second to catch up. All right, everyone should be here now. Now we're just going to test the syntax. If you've never run a pipeline before, what this does is it takes that definition of the YAML file and it's going to apply it. We're going to run our pipeline by clicking the green button, run pipeline. And typically, if we have other branches, we've been working in this repo or project for a while, we can apply that pipeline versus a variety of branches. But right now, assuming you haven't created any other branches in your repo, we're going to do this against master. We're not adding any special variables, but if you wanted to recreate or do your own conditions, you can go ahead and just, if you would provide those, and I'm going to click the green button for Run Pipeline. All right. So, and I see there is a question about adding a YAML file fix. So we actually are going to fix this for the Apache YAML in real time. So that will be applied as we work through this together. Hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, please speak up again through the Q&A. So you can see that my pipeline has failed because if I click on here in this lint job that you should have, click for lint, GitLab's going to give you a terminal view into the job as it runs. Now this one's already failed, so I can scroll down and I can see the error code here at the bottom. But what GitLab also does through the terminal output is it tells me on line 7, column 6, which I know that's, I reverted and I applied that change. Okay, so there's my error. We realize this is not going to deploy to production because there's something wrong with this playbook. So let's go fix it. On the right-hand side, you can see that I've got this issue. So we're going to follow along. So if you get lost, please refer to these steps. So going to my project, there's an issue icon. All right, it looks like a ticket or a card. Go ahead and that's represents our issues. So go ahead and click issues and then list. Okay, so you may have an empty list here. That's okay. We're going to create a new issue for everyone to say, hey, there's a broken playbook. Let's fix it. Right? We just don't overwrite because we don't want to, implement a change that maybe breaks something further. We want that history for auditing and all sorts of reasons, and we can do that directly through our GitLab interface. So I'm going to click the green button and select New Issues. Now this screen, you can put all sorts of metadata into the issue itself. One of my favorite things to do is you can apply issue descriptions. If I have a template set up, I could also add those in. What's really cool about those issue templates is they're repeatable. If you are adhering to agile practices, maybe you have the definition of done defined, you can add those fields so that every time someone creates an issue, it's going to be repeatable with a high level of quality. It's going to have the right information that you're requesting so that people are filling these out consistently. Right now, I don't have that because we're going to just make this as simple as possible. So I'm going to provide a new issue. Okay, so I'm going to write broken playbook. You can write whatever makes sense to you as long as you remember what this issue is going to be called. And since there should only be one in your list after this, it should be pretty easy to find. Okay, now you can add a description or you can write gibberish as I just did. Okay, for people that are worried about maybe vulnerabilities or broken items that they don't want everyone else finding out about for security reasons, GitLab gives you the ability to make issues confidential, which would limit it to a select set of people. So if there's something that maybe you don't want the team to know about right now, but you can expose later on, we can make this issue and it's only going to be available to them for editing and read-only access. We don't need that level of security right now for the workshop, but just know that that's available to you. If you need to attach screenshots, like, hey, something's broken, you can attach a screenshot to get that definition. GitLab will allow you to do that. Let's assign the issue to yourself. Okay, so you can simply select to yourself, or if there's another user, like I really think Matthew is not doing enough today. So let's add, we could add a list to Matthew, which is totally not true. He's doing a lot. I would assign it to myself. Matthew's busy doing great things. I'm just teasing. So the next part is we can associate this issue with an epic. Now for organizations that say, hey, for this next quarter, for this next year, we're going to do some really great things. It's the direction that sets a tone for our project. but it's kind of nebulous in the description, right? Well, what's really great things mean? That might be developing a new backend. That might be making the front end more user-friendly. There's lots of things. And it might be even accomplished by many different projects. But we can actually adhere to that direction by selecting the epic and tying that up. And what this does at the bottom level, at the team level, is it allows us to make sure we're developing toward things that people actually want us to develop toward. We're not just creating work or going off on our own direction. So it's aligning that work we do to purpose. But at the top level, if I'm a business leader or manager or whatever my title is, I can scope from the epic view, and I can consume all those different issues that are tied to my epic. I can get roadmap status, I can get start and end dates, and it's a lot easier to communicate to stakeholders that, hey, I'm confident XYZ is going to be done because we're 95% away done with all of our issues, versus what tended to happen in my past is anytime we were around the program manager's table and he wanted status on where we're at, everyone was on time until they weren't. Right until that last Friday before the deployment on Monday, and then all of a sudden, oops, something broke. We need to come in over the weekend. Let's not do that. So anyway, for simplicity's sake, just go ahead and attach to this do really good things epic. Okay. A milestone in GitLab is going to be a time frame. So some people might call them sprints, releases. We don't care what you call them, but they're going to have a start and end date. And this is where your metrics for burn up charts, burn down charts are going to come from. So based on this time frame that we've associated with a milestone, you can attach this issue to it. So if maybe you're on sprint A and you want an issue to be attached to it for filtering or making sure we're not just working on things that we shouldn't for the time frame, this is one of the places you would attach that. We're not doing this step for now. A label is going to be one way that we can categorize the issues. So as a team, we can have, say, UI issues, so a label that says UI, or we can have, any number of labels to slice and dice the data. And where this is going to help is for the boards that we're going to show you a little later, but it allows you to filter at a level and get rid of all the noise without deleting data, right? It's going to allow us to filter that and get that simplistic view that we need to. Some people do this through pivot tables and charts and all sorts of fancy ways in a spreadsheet. At a very simplistic level, we can do that here in GitLab. I'm not doing anything for now. Due date is a specific time frame. We're going to say because this environment is going away soon, I'm just going to tie it for today. But this is an option, or optional. It's not mandatory, but if you want to go ahead and choose any of these items, go ahead and do so. So lastly, we're going to submit the issue by selecting this green button. Now let me check back in. Have I lost anyone, or are there any questions on what I've shown so far? All right, I'm going to assume no. So that means we're chugging along here. So with our broken issue, or our broken playbook issue, you can see on the right hand, we're going to go to the next step. Now, from the same place you selected the new issue, there's also an option for boards. So go ahead and select issues and then boards. And you can see your view will look similar to what the GIF here. Okay, so I'm going to do this through a new board. And I'm just going to name this workshop board. And we will be in the same, and if I can spell. Okay, we will be in the same spot here. So you can see that with my workshop board or through your new board, just go ahead and select, you're going to create your own view. So we don't need to inherit anything, just use your own. Within GitLab, for this view, or the boards view, it's going to be like a Kanban board. For those that aren't familiar with Kanban, it's a flow-based process. If you think of like an assembly line for vehicles, so it starts with the one thing and ends with the last, and it moves through the work moves through these different stages in a serial fashion. GitLab provides out-of-the-box Kanban boards that you can, with like to-do or completed phases, or if you want to do your own, you can see that I can add these different labels that we call scoped labels. So if you can see, if I'm just going to expand my browser here a little bit for a better view. you can see that I've got these different stages. Okay, so the work starts with workflow accepted, meaning yes, we're going to work on this. It's owned by the team. The work is done, and the work is deployed, and so forth. And I kind of have development out of sync here, but you get the idea. And as these labels or these issues go through the different stages, they're going to inherit different labels. Okay, you can see this workshop issue has the label workflow completed. With the scoped labels in GitLab, an issue can only have one scoped label at a time. It's one way that each team can define the workflows. So this particular scoped label process is only for this project. Another team might have other processes. And that's how GitLab, being the single application, allows people to work in ways that work for their team, right? So as I move this to the next workflow deployed, you can see that label changed. So you should have a workflow or a board that looks similar to mine by adding that to your board, adding that list and choosing the scope labels. Okay. So now as I scroll down here on the steps, we've talked and associated with this in Epic, but if you didn't get that chance, if I click on an issue, you're going to see here my issue view again. I've collapsed my sidebar, but if yours is open, it'll look something like this. And this is where if I hadn't associated with it, I can reassociate or associate this issue with the Epic. It's already done. But the same metadata or those same fields that I showed you when creating the issue, if something changes after the fact, this is where you would make that change. Okay. All right. So we've performed the pipeline test. We've shown the failure. We created the issue as a result. So we're going to go ahead and create a merge request off of this issue. Within GitLab, the merge request is where the rubber, hypothetically meets the road. It's where, okay, an idea becomes more than just an idea that's in a backlog of different items. It becomes, now we're actually going to do something against this. So this is where the Git or the source control aspect of GitLab comes into play. So if you see in your issue, go ahead and click this Create Merge Request button. We're going to click on that, and then I'll take a second to let everyone catch up. All right, so hopefully you are where I am at. So the merge request view is going to be the equivalent of your car dashboard. Now, if you think of a vehicle, it's kind of a system of systems. You have your engine as a system, your brakes as another system. I mean, even your windshield wiper system as another one. But that car dashboard is going to give you visibility to each of those through oil gauges, temperature gauges, battery, all sorts. And so this is where the merge request acts like that, is that it percolates all these different aspects of the continuous integration deployment into one single view. Now it started this by, we created the merge request off of the issue. And so it's going to automatically link this merge request for the issue. Now, if you've gone in and worked with all these different spiderweb systems where you've had to start working in one system and do it in another, try how did auditing go in that example? Probably pretty hard, right? Because it wasn't linked. If I needed to dig into something to see what change affected the issue, I had to go into different systems with different authentication, and it's a mess. GitLab linked this merge request to the issue, and then it also created a branch pre-appended with the issue number, which you might be like, okay, yeah. Well, again, the auditability, as someone who was a test engineer to start their career, it's such a pain to go find what change happened when if I have to dig into all these different branches. But if it's pre-appended with the issue number, I mean, it's very basic, but very simple and effective. So now we can see that, okay, we have this branch, the target or destination is going to be the master baseline. We're going to fix this change. We saw the broken pipeline before. So GitLab can provide you an out-of-the-box web IDE. So click on that button. And it's going to give us our repo files here on the left-hand side. So I have my YAML file or CI YAML, Apache, and so forth. We know that the Apache YAML is where the error occurred because of the pipeline output that we saw under the lint job. So under this Apache YAML, click on there, go to line 7, and instead of here, just type or click here, and we're going to replace this with name. So go ahead and do that now. And while you're doing that, just know that the GitLab Web ID is a very lightweight interface, but it will detect what languages you're using in your repo and present you with the appropriate environment. So that's why mine looks the way it does, and hopefully you've applied the change. Now the next step is to actually commit the change, right? So we're saying, okay, let's put this back. GitLab's going to provide you with a diff or a difference page to show you what changed from the previous to the latter. In this example, it's pretty obvious, but what happens when you have like 30, 40, 50 lines of code? It becomes much more difficult to find those differences unless you're given an environment where it's made obvious. Apply a commit message. Typically, it should be something descriptive to let others know what that commit message or commit was. In the interest of time, I again provide gibberish. Some might say that that's actually what I do on a daily basis, but just go ahead and put whatever message works for you. And we're going to commit this to the branch that we created and click the green button. So go ahead and do that. So while that's going on, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner a pipeline icon. It looks like a pie chart. There's also a number, and there's another hyperlink here. So we can do a couple things. Those show us the pipeline that's running. I can either click the rocket ship at the top right and visualize the status for that pipeline. You should see that as well. And if you click on the 61857, that's the actual ID for my pipeline. I'm going to click here. And you can see the pipeline in process. The lint job is already passed. If I click on the test, and you can follow along, you can actually see the job running. So success, that's a good thing. Hopefully you achieve the same result. I'm going to click pipelines and go back and visualize that change and just click on that. As you see here, that this is a very simple example, but if I can go through and get a list of all the jobs that were run, if this is more comprehensive, I can find the failures, I can address the failures and rerun these as needed. So it's pretty simple but powerful UI here to running your continuous integration deployment. Okay, now if I look here and I go into my tower environment and I click on my non-prod deploy web servers, right? This is the environment that those changes were made to. You can see that I have a good running instance here with a time status. You should have that exact same result. If you do not, please let us know in the Q&A, and one of the panelists here will help troubleshoot or walk you through some steps. But we also knew this was successful because the test passed. So kind of like a cool yay for integration, right? So if I go back to my merge request, you can see here on the left-hand side, the merge request icon, click there. And you can see the merge request that we just addressed, so click on that. Now we went through a couple different clicks before to look at the pipeline status, but if maybe I wasn't making the change to the playbook and I was just an observer or a stakeholder, if I'm in the merge request, I can see the results of that pipeline right here. I can also see at the top of this merge request, I can see the history of all commits. Now we've only done one, but you can see that history. I can see the results of all pipelines. So if there were as a history of failures, well, what changed and made this successful? Well, if I click on the changes button, I get that visualization. Now what's really cool here is if you're an auditor or a tester or someone and it's not obvious to you what changed, go here. Or if you're doing peer review programming, right? So you can see that, let me scroll down to catch up here on the right-hand side. Okay. Is that on the file here, if I have a comment you can see next to the name, if I hover over here, you see a comment bubble. We can actually start a workflow to say, hey, why did you make this change? So I can do something as simple as, why the change? You're going to probably be a lot more insightful than mine, but this is a good way to start a review process directly with an interface that actually lives on as an artifact of this merge request. So that if I leave the organization or if I'm on vacation, no one has to try and ask me, hey, where's this information? It's not living in my inbox anywhere. It's not living in my brain. It's listed here within the merge request for context for everyone within the organization. So I'm going to click the Start a Review button, and I've started that review process. Let's talk about this change. Is this the right change? And if we determine it is, I can click Finish Review and Submit Review. Okay, so those two green buttons. Now, we not only have the history of changes, the predictable pipeline, the auditability all on one single view. We can even collaborate in real time in the code as it makes sense to us. Okay, so the next part here is we're going to go to verify the change. Okay, so we walked through those steps. We did the comment bubble. Now we're going to go in to make sure that the fix was applied. All right, so if I go to the project overview here, or also known as the home icon, I click here. I can see my history of files. Now, under this drop down here, you can visualize the different branches that we've run. You might only have one, but go and click on the most recent one you've applied. I'm in my branch. If I want to click on the Apache file here, I can see that the application was made. Okay, now at the top, while we're here, go ahead and click on master. Compare this to the previous. It still has the old fix. So you can see that we're working in a very isolated change before we release this out to production. Okay, so this is helpful in making sure that nothing's released out to production that shouldn't be. So now let's go, we've agreed this is great. We've done the review process. We've tested it out with Tower. Now let's go to the merge request and say, let's apply this to production. We're ready to make the big decision. So I go back to my merge request. And what you might see here under yours is there's an approval button. Okay, so I'm going to show you how this is done within GitLab. For most people, I've applied this to your project, so it's already available to you. You'll see an approval option here for, we named the overlords, but there's a group where I talked about you can have test or QA or management or whomever, but it's that gate to make sure that nothing releases into production that shouldn't. So if I go to my settings in general, I can identify merge request approvals. So I can say, hey, let's add an approval rule that maybe has the Red Hat workshop group, and they belong in this particular group within our environment. Anyone who's a part of this group can approve. I can say it could be one approval, or if I think one person's not trustworthy enough, or we need that extra set of eyes, we can increase this number. But this is that gate, a very simple, easy way to enforce quality in your organization without, while limiting the risk and the potential for putting something in production that we shouldn't. Now, for most circumstances, it's a good practice to not approve your own merge request, right? We can't be the own guardians of our code because we're biased and we see things in a way that maybe less, I'm trying to think, people with a different perspective can actually see things differently because they're not as close to the code. But for this particular example, I've allowed for each person to approve their own code, and I'm going to do so in this particular step. But that's where you would find this merge request approval. And if you're using like an LDAP, you can assign this to groups within your LDAP as well. So it's a pretty easy way to enforce quality again. So back to the merge request. Hopefully you're familiar with where this is now. Back to the one we're working on. And I'm going to say, hey, approve. Pretend I'm not myself and I'm going to approve this merge request. So go ahead and click that button now. Everyone should have that approval. After that is approved, we're going to say this merge request is ready for prime time. So we got to mark that as ready. Until this is done, we can't merge into the destination, and that's as intended. So once I've selected that ready, you'll see the merge button screen. It's popped up and it's ready for, hey, we're going to do this. I'm going to give you guys a second to go ahead and do that. And please type if in the Q&A if you are not at that place. All right, so go ahead and we're going to click that green button now, and GitLab's going to kick off a pipeline. So as I showed in the CI/YAML, where we had a pipeline for branches, which were these two jobs, we have a different pipeline for master, because this is, we're going to have different conditions, different jobs that need to be run. You can see this in the same merge request. So if I click on the pipeline itself, I can either visualize the status from that merge request, or I can watch the jobs in real time. You can see what happens if in case there's a failure or something doesn't deploy properly. Okay, so that's, we can get that information. So we're gonna go ahead and you can dig through each of the different jobs if you want to. You can see the results. I'm going to give it a second while this passes. Oop. Now I did have a deploy failure here, so that's, I may have an issue with my promote to prod template. So if you had configured tower correctly, and I probably made a typo in the past, I haven't adjusted this, but you should see your pipeline pass.
Ah, you took a shortcut, Joseph.
I know.
I told you it was important to spend the time up front. I'm just kidding. So the one that I created, I went through, I was following all of your steps and I merged, and I did get a success. So it ran. So the way we have this configured for anybody else is that each pipeline is reaching out and touching the Ansible Tower API. So mine were successful. If you go back to the Ansible Tower portal, you probably have to log in because it, as a security feature, by default it logs you out. But if you log back in and go to either, yeah, so Joseph's got it, the jobs or the dashboard.
There we go.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, you don't have the workflow. So you should have a workflow called prod deploy web servers, but that's fine.
So it wouldn't be a demo or a workshop if something didn't go wrong. But what Absolutely. I can do, Matthew, is if you can share your screen with your tower and then also your completed projects. We're basically at the end of the GitLab portion anyway. So do you mind if I unshare my screen?
Go for it, yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so I did the same thing. Sorry, I reverted my GitLab theme back to dark mode because I love darker things. It's just so easy on the eyes. So this is my merged issue. So I went through all the same processes that Joseph did, and my pipelines all succeeded because I followed the instructions. Sorry, Joseph, it's too easy. But yeah, going back to Ansible Tower, if you so the first thing you see is the how do I get rid of this? The dashboard, and it's kind of a list of all of the recent jobs that have run. So before we had these failures, we had the non-prod failure, and then after that we have some successes. So when we merged, or sorry, when we created the new branch I'll go ahead and click on this one here because I know what it is. When we created the new branch, mine was called serially fix because I'm trying to be clever. This was the first one that succeeded because we had the syntax fix in here. So remember, this is the one that's running on non-production. Going back to Ansible, going back to GitLab, this is this job, the first test one that passed. So that got launched in Tower. And then the next one that succeeded was we run it again as part of the workflow. So if I click on the workflow that ran, the job that ran, we see that we finally get a non-prod deploy web servers success, which leads to a prod deploy web server success as part of this last step in GitLab called deploy. So this is all working as intended. We only want to deploy to production when we've verified that things are succeeding in non-production. This is one of the tenets, I believe, of GitOps. So yeah. Anything else, Joseph?
No, that's it. Thank you, Matthew. And that really does conclude the workshop as far as integrating Ansible Tower with GitLab, configuring the CI variables within GitLab so those systems work together, and then being able to run your pipeline against the fix that you've made for our syntax error. As I mentioned in the beginning of this workshop, the slides that were presented, the steps that are presented in this workshop are available through the links that I've pasted here in the chat for your availability. Now, the GitLab environment will go away sooner than later. I believe the time is around midnight tonight. So if you want to download any artifacts or to reproduce these steps on your own, if you have an Ansible Tower environment to work with, please, by all means, run through these steps, check them out, and we would love your feedback. My name is Joseph Valeriano, and we will, when we send out a follow-up email to this workshop, we will link some of those resources and also give points of contact so that if you have questions or want to follow up on anything particular to your own use case, you will have that information. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to pass the mic back to Matt Brown from One Technologies.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. And I think you closed it out there pretty good. We'll make sure that all the resources available to everyone, contact information, if anyone has any follow-up or is interested in doing another round of this with their their internal organization, with their broader teams, that's absolutely something we can facilitate. We're happy to help, but yeah, and if there's any follow-up questions, everyone should have received an email this morning that's got the Red Hat, GitLab, and One Tech team in the subject line last night, this evening. If you respond to that with questions, we'll get them answered too. But keep an eye out, like Joseph said, keep an eye out for the follow-up, and we're happy to help with anything else that comes up. So with that, we'll wrap up here. And
I think we do actually have a question that I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, if you don't mind, Matt.
Yeah, for sure.
So someone asked, can we talk through some of the use cases? Yeah, so there's a lot here. These tools are quite powerful, in my opinion. There's the GitLab, which is this sort of all-in-one project management, automation, CI/CD platform. And then we talked about OpenShift as well as Ansible Tower. And both of these are, again, just platforms that are able to take something like multiple teams, developers, security people, your lines of business, and auditors, really everything that makes a business, and extend that ability and really be force multipliers in terms of what those people can do. So really, we're talking about any kind of software development, any kind of application design, everything from mobile apps to software APIs and that sort of thing. These are the tools that everybody's using today to really make developers go as far as possible. So yeah, it's hard to come up with a specific use case, or I mean, there really is just so much here. So we can talk more about that if you guys want to reach out to us, like Matt and Joseph said. This is actually the first time that we ran this, so I'm super excited to see people participating and actually using it. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Perfect. And unless we see anything else pop up here real quick, we'll get wrapped up. But if anyone, I guess the other thing that folks are often interested in or curious about is pricing. If anybody wants to see, what Ansible Tower, or OpenShift instances, or GitLab for your organization licensing looks like, don't hesitate. You can send a note to me. This is Matt Brown. I'll get it redirected to the right people. To get that together, even if it's just an exercise in curiosity, we're happy to do it. So, but with that, we will wrap up here. And if anyone has any questions, please reach out via the email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
you.
Bye.